telling me that you have a way to defer the tax situation there? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And so the first one I was referring to is a 1031 exchange, which only applies to investment real estate. The second one I'm referring to is called a deferred sales trust.
A real eye-opener to see that there are ways that people can use the regulatory framework, if properly structured, to invest 1031 exchange dollars in things that you would not think were like kind to what they exited from. So it was very impressive. I got to say, you are the first one I've seen pull this off, and I'm pretty hesitant to believe in a lot of these kinds of things. So it's a major feat for me to say, wow, this actually really worked, and it was really cool.
1031 is a way to shelter your income when you sell the thing. The DST is a way to avoid the 1031 and not have to suffer the time penalty.
Our career and during different tax periods, we've seen, these tax avoidance, tax minimization, offshore, all these different strategies undertaken to minimize or avoid taxes. And then I can tell you that, some of them are just not worth the trouble. And so I was skeptical. Admittedly, I was skeptical. I thought, oh yeah, here we go, another one of these, right? And then they say, no, it really is different, right? So look more closely. We looked more closely. We had, honestly, 2 years of conversations. 2 years. Now we were being due diligence at the same time that we were doing due diligence, but 2 years is a long time to be, sort of flirting with the idea of and getting to know the people and getting to really understand the transaction. Yeah, long story short, we got comfortable, although we are not tax attorneys, lawyers, or estate planning attorneys, that at least, from an investment perspective, that, it made sense to sell a highly appreciated asset, get liquid, hold that in this type of a deferred or installment sale type of instrument, and then just be in a position then to do the most important thing. I'm probably stealing your next question, which is time. They say, well, you can't make more time. You can. The Deferred Sales Trust, in a way, allows you to lengthen the investment time horizon for those assets after getting liquid, but before having to feel the tax impact. And from an investment manager's perspective, time horizon is the most important element in investing.
Hey, Brett, I don't think we can hear you.
Oh, here we go. I am now live. Can you hear me all right? All right, everybody. How we doing? Hey, I want to welcome everyone to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions Deferred Sales Trust Mastermind, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options, and not having a clear plan is the enemy. And using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is the best way for you to exit highly appreciated real estate, business, cryptocurrency, primary homes, save a failed 1031 exchange so you can create and preserve more wealth. For those who don't know me, my name is Brett Swarts, and I'm founder of Capital Gains Tax Solutions, and we're on a mission to help you get clarity and get some connection and get some execution when it comes to the Deferred Sales Trust, making it as simple as we can, giving you a deal story to really digest and chew on, and then giving you some live deals that are happening right now so we can kind of document our journey. We can all learn from the nuances that is the Deferred Sales Trust. Solve problems. The best analogy I think we have right now these days is like in a Rubik's Cube, and everyone shows up a little bit different every day with different colors and different challenges and different goals. And our goals as a team to work together, taking the collective mastermind approach. We want to try to get as congruent as we can for you and or for your clients. And so you can help them create and preserve more wealth, or you can execute your Deferred Sales Trust. I am joined by two amazing gentlemen every single week who help me do just exactly this and help to execute on the Deferred Sales Trust. One of them is my co-host in the podcast every week. He is Pierce York. He's a luxury realtor down in Newport Beach. He is part of the EXP family with myself, and he is also up and coming all things capital gains tax deferral. Pierce, how are we doing today?
Oh, fantastic. How are you guys doing?
doing well. And the other gentleman is, I call him the CPA Whisperer, financial advisor extraordinaire. He's just an amazing thinker and person, and he helps in all things financial advising for our clients. And so, welcome, Jake Miller. Jake, how we doing?
Doing very well. Calling in from Colombia today. Had an interesting last minute change of schedule from Dallas to Utah. Instead of Utah, I came down here to Colombia, having a great time, meeting with some semi-famous people. And at the end of the day, we're just helping them strategize, structure things right, and make very smart money moves.
Very cool. I'm Pierce. For those who are wondering what the vision is for today, can you give them a little bit more about the vision for today?
Yeah, absolutely. So today we are here to come together to ask questions, to learn, to bring your financial professionals together so that we can discuss different solutions that are possible, possible methods for you guys to defer capital gains tax, create, preserve more wealth. And we're really showcasing the Deferred Sales Trust as the primary feature, not the only one, but the primary one. And we're here to basically just answer questions, create the community, and come up with solutions for you guys.
Perfect. And Jake Miller, what is the kind of the biggest frustration you feel like people when they face the 1031 exchange or the deferred sales trust? Like, what's even the problem? Like, why do people need a new solution? What are some of the biggest challenges when people are exiting their assets?
Absolutely, Brett. A lot of times people have worked their entire lives for one of these really big assets, or it's perhaps not their entire lifetime that they've worked for, but it's a very large transaction compared to all the transactions of their life. And their biggest hesitation to sell is because they're going to incur the highest rates of taxes. And typically business owners, entrepreneurs, they do a lot of strategizing throughout the years, but very few of them know or understand these one-time transactional strategies well enough to implement them. They know and understand, hey, my accountant has this spending plan, I should go buy a car. Or, hey, let's buy more inventory. Or, hey, let's do year-end spending planning. It's not necessarily tax flow planning. It's not necessarily investment planning, but they understand how to do that year to year. What a lot of them don't have experience doing, and it makes perfect sense, is they don't have that once in a lifetime transaction experience. I'm going to sell my warehouse. I'm going to sell my business. I'm going to sell, I invested in crypto and it went way up and then it went way down and now it's going back up, or whatever, right? Whatever their scenario is, this is a critical moment to them. And it's something that they don't have a lot of experience in, and they don't know how to handle it. So they're afraid of paying all the taxes, or at the end of the day, the deal doesn't make sense. If they don't net enough money, it just doesn't make sense. Whereas if they knew better how to incorporate a partial 1031 and a deferred sales trust, or if they knew better how to do what we do, Brett, then they wouldn't fear it so much.
Very well said. And I love the way you put that. Like, these are these are important transactions, and maybe the most important one, something you poured blood, sweat, and tears into, and you're looking at 30 to 50% in capital gains tax and depreciation recapture, depending on the asset. And so the math and the numbers need to make sense, as well as the actual outcome of what it's going to mean for you and your family and your wealth legacy, and the ability to give, the ability to invest in a new entrepreneurial deal or real estate, or just be passive and put it in the biggest companies in the world, S&P 500, and just know that you can preserve your wealth and diversify in times like this. The other big thing that's happening right now, and it's known as the largest wealth transfer in the history of the planet, according to the American Bankers Association, and it's somewhere around $32 trillion, and it's by the baby boomers. And the baby boomers are retiring at a rapid pace. In fact, there's about 77 million in the U.S. alone, and there's 10,000 turning 65 every single day. And they have massive amount of wealth that's going to transfer to the millennials. And this is, again, known as the largest wealth transfer in the history of the planet, which is staggering to think about. And when they transfer out of these assets, of which, by the way, 50% of the total net worth of America is primary homes, businesses, private equity, and commercial real estate, And these are highly appreciated illiquid assets that a lot of people want to retire from the toilet's trash liability, just be able to travel more, do something different. And yet they're faced with this huge tax burden. And the question is, what's going to happen, right? Are they going to have to continue the 1031 exchange dance? By the way, I just did a YouTube video on that. You can watch about a 13-minute video where I talk about all of the challenges with the 1031 exchange and the dance that people have to go through. I had a gentleman call me this week and I said, why are you going to choose the Deferred Sales Trust? He goes, I'm just tired of the 1031 exchange dance. I said, you know what? That'd be a great video to make, right? It does feel like a dance, right? You're dancing with the lenders, you're dancing with the sellers, right? It's like, I don't know if you ever went to a school dance, Jake, in high school, and maybe you're dancing with the one girl, but that you came with, but the other one wants to dance with you. And so now you're scrambling in between and you kind of want, it just becomes a whole kind of song and dance. And the 1031 exchange, unfortunately, puts the pressure on you, the investor, to perhaps overpay in an interest rate environment that's going higher, right? And in a inventory market that's really shrinking down, and in a real estate market that's values that are still very high. And so you go, why go through this whole song and dance when you can be in a deferred sales trust, blue ocean, diversified portfolio of liquid investments in some of the biggest companies in the world, and perhaps even increase your cash flow, right? And so that's the part of it, Jake, though, that people just go, it just seems like it's too good to be true, Jake. So, what am I missing here? And what are the downsides, Jake? Let's start with maybe why someone wouldn't do this, because people probably are very skeptical if they're learning about this for the first time or even haven't done it yet.
Absolutely. And we want to make sure that we don't waste anyone's time. So identifying when it doesn't make sense is critical. Typically, if an individual has an asset and they're approaching the end of their life, and they don't want to leave the proceeds to their heirs, but they just want to leave that asset. They don't want the asset to change, and their heirs don't want the asset to change. So this could be a family cabin. There's a perfect example of this, Brett. Family cabin. A guy was talking with us about the best way to transition the property to the next generations and to keep it as an ongoing asset for the family. And came to me asking, hey, should I do a deferred sales trust for this? What? And I asked, but don't you want your family to continue to enjoy this piece of property throughout? Well, yes, I do. But you guys talk all about the deferred sales trust so much. I mean, it sounds like such a good thing. And I'm like, yes, it can be. And you have other assets that it would make more sense for, other assets that should you not sell them and do what we're doing here, it would not have as good of an outcome for your children and for your heirs. But for this asset, the cabin, because you don't want to change it out, you want it to stay the same for your kids, then the deferred sales trust is not the proper thing to do with the cabin. And largely that is because of the step up in basis that they would lose if they changed the asset. So if somebody were to die and leave an asset to their heirs, and if it's directly going to their heirs, typically when it comes to real estate specifically, as well as other assets, but not everything, but typically when it comes to real estate, they get a step up in basis. So if the father's ownership in the family cabin was, let's say, $2 million, which roughly 2.1, whatever, right? And it's today's value is 10 million. Well, the kids would get a step up in basis to that $10 million mark. And that would be more advantageous since they're not gonna sell it. That would be more advantageous to the family to leave it there. So that's one example, right?
Yeah, so that's one example. I'll do two quick summary. One example would be if the asset in which you are selling, right, or considering selling, you actually want to keep, and or your heirs want to keep it, and it's towards the end of your life. You're older in years, and in other words, you don't necessarily mind holding on to it, and the kids actually want to hold on to it. And like family cabin's a great example. They get a stepped up basis upon your passing, and that's the main thing we're solving for is capital gains tax. Although we do also solve for estate tax, and we eliminate that. Quick aside on that, you can either have a stepped up basis or outside your taxable estate, but you can't have both at the same time. So you kind of got to choose. The only time that might change in that little scenario, let's say that's a $20 million cabin, and let's say he's a single individual and all 20 million is inside of his taxable estate. And this comes to the Rubik's Cube scenario, right? Where we say, well, tell us about your total net worth. And he goes, well, I'm worth, $20 $25 million. Okay. And that cabin is how much? It's a $20 million cabin. Okay. And you want to keep the cabin as much as you can? Yeah. Well, we get that, but do you realize that upon your passing, if you're only single, you get a $12 million exclusion. Anything above that's going to be hit with a 40% death tax, which could trigger your kids to have to sell the cabin, right? Which kind of defeats the purpose. So what we could do is just sell the cabin while you're still alive, get it outside your taxable estate, eliminate all of that estate tax. Yeah, you did have to sell the cabin to a third-party buyer, but now the kids don't have to pay 40% of death tax, of which, guess what? They maybe buy a cabin down the street because of that, right? So these are the nuances to every single scenario. Typically the answer for a lot of things is all depends. But if it were a scenario where there's no estate tax challenges, right, and it's just a family cabin, then indeed we would probably say, yeah, don't use the deferred sales trust, just get the stepped up basis and continue on. So that is definitely disadvantage and a little nuance there. Jake, what would you say the second disadvantage might be for somebody, or maybe a hesitation for them to not want to use the deferred sales trust?
So if the transaction has already occurred and you're trying to pull it apart or reverse do it after the fact, timing is critical. Timing is very important. We want to show IRS proper intent. The trust needs to be set up beforehand. You have no idea how many people come to me and say, hey, my client did this 6 months ago, right? Because a lot of people come to us through other advisors. They need to kind of level up to the people that have experience doing this thing. It's kind of like the high school dance that you're talking about, where everything's super awkward because they kind of know what they're supposed to do, but they don't. And we're kind of like dancing with the stars over here. We understand the routine. And sometimes they bring us people that just aren't a right fit, the timing is wrong. They've already had the transaction and we've kind of sailed that ship already.
Yep. Very good. Hey, Pierce, what was kind of the minimum size deals, right? Because that's also something to know, like who this works for and what do we want to see and kind of why is that?
Yeah, so typically we want to see $1 million net proceeds and $1 million gain. And the reason is because there has to be enough pain in the tax liability in order to kind of go through the process. It has to be worth it. You can also do 2 transactions, $500,000 a piece that can kind of add up to that million. But that million is really where it makes the most sense. It's a home run in pretty much every market.
Makes sense. Yeah. And so a little quick summary, it's $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain per transaction, unless you have 2 at $500,000 each. And then in that scenario, you have an opportunity to combine and kind of scale. It's kind of like if you buy, multifamily properties, you're not buying just 10 units, you want to buy like 50 or 100 units so you can scale it. Same thing with the trust, it starts to scale for the ongoing fees. So, I think another disadvantage someone might perceive as a disadvantage or hesitation, I guess is a better way to put it, is, well, Jake, I got to give up the control, right? Like I got to completely just be, just give it up to these other people, these third-party financial advisors, this third-party trustee. And I'm just, you're telling me I'm going to sell my $50 million business or cryptocurrency or everything, and then I'm just going to be out of control. So Jake, help people understand that the perceived disadvantage there is not really a disadvantage, and what kind of controls they do have in place.
Absolutely. In this type of relationship, people have to learn how to know, like, and trust us, right? Specifically you, Brett, as the trustee, as the third party, unrelated trustee that they cannot deem to have power or control or influence over you. You weren't the best man at their wedding. You weren't, all of these other things prior in their life. It's critical that in this scenario, in this situation, that there's an unrelated and independent third-party trustee. Some people view that as, well, that's scary. Somebody else has control over my money. I don't even have anybody else as a signer on my bank account. How can I give Brett Swarts control over the proceeds of my asset? There's a process we take people through to kind of help them know and understand the technicalities and the fact that Brett take the money and, I don't know, go to Colombia or something, right? And do something nefarious with those proceeds. That Brett, there's a lot of checks and balances in place, and it's a 2-signature process. There's a change in ownership to lendership for the client. And for purposes of the IRS, Brett's signature is going to go on a whole bunch of stuff, but that's a layer of protection so that this big transaction that the client would otherwise incur and have to pay lots of taxes on can get deferred. And so we show them that, yes, we do move some control over the asset, but everything has to be countersigned. Everything has to be reviewed. There's checks and balances. I'm in the mix a lot of times, these things. Brett's in the mix. The tax attorney is in the mix. And technically, for something nefarious and bad to actually happen, several people would have to collude. And the likelihood of several people wanting to throw their life and their career away to do something nefarious is incredibly unlikely.
Yep. And there's never been a single issue, thousands of closes, billions under management, and in one single deferred sales trust with all the systems and processes, the deferred sales trust tax attorney, CPA, and have all put together over the years. And so that is that's a great response to that. And let's see. So yes, there's also a lifetime audit defense. So some people might say, well, disadvantage could be I'm more likely to get audited, or I'm more likely, I had that one this week, Jake. They were like, well, am I going to get audited now? Like I'm more likely to get audited. And the fact is that of the audits, there's been over about 20 or so kind of collectively. There's been about 12, random audits from clients. And these random ones were not triggered by the deferred sales trust. They were just high net worth individuals who happened to get an audit. During that audit of the individual, they found they used the deferred sales trust, and that began the audit of the deferred sales trust. And those were all no change, no findings, like so perfect there. And then there was additional formal audits on some very large cases, one being a $125 million deal in California. No change, no findings. In fact, there was another audit that just happened last week for a $25 million deal in California. No change, no findings. That one concluded. That was done. So that's a fresh one off of the perfect legal track record. And so there's a lifetime audit defense as well. Even if you do get audited by our business partners, the tax attorneys, created the structure. And so there's no necessarily audit risk in the sense of the trust is going to trigger it. If the size of the deal is really large, in general, obviously the larger the deal, the more likelihood that the IRS is going to audit it. And but again, it's a perfect track record. Yet, Jake, there's still a lot of people out there that are just saying, the California Franchise Tax Board, or 1031 exchange companies write these blogs. California Franchise Tax Board says the deferred sales trust, is not going to work in California, or these different things. And yet we just keep closing the deals. So what do you say to those who are, skeptical on the legality of the trust, and maybe share a little bit of your experience on the things that you've gone through to vet different strategies overall in your past 10 years in the business?
Absolutely. And, a lot of people, very first thing that they do is they Google, and that's not necessarily bad. There's a lot of readily information available through Google, and they shouldn't stop doing that. That's okay. But you have to learn how to qualify the plethora of information out there on the web, right? From what source does the information come? And that's critical. Having been the back office for a national association of CPA firm owners, one CPA firm owner might say, hey, Jake, my client so-and-so went to some dinner seminar last night with some attorney. He's an attorney, right? And they've got this amazing trust. And I'm going to call it the kitchen sink trust because it does it all, including the kitchen sink. And is it any good? So then, the information that the client gave the CPA that then gave me, obviously, is typically marketing and advertising material directly from, the people. And you have to kind of understand and look into it a little bit more. What is the history? And have they done it enough? Have they done it thousands upon thousands of times? Have they done it so much that just by the rule of large numbers, the IRS has tested it? What does that mean? The IRS has scrutinized it in such a way to see if it could be disallowed. And if they did, was it disallowed or was it not? Many strategies out there, Brett, that are good strategies have been disallowed, and it's important to know when and why. Why was it disallowed? How do I do it right? Under what scenario does it work? The wonderful thing about the deferred sales trust, Brett, is it has never been disallowed. Under zero conditions has it ever been unraveled and disallowed. It has 100% track record, 1,000% batting, or it's batting 1,000, I guess. That's how you would say that. when I go to my clients and we review some of the things that they want to do, and we talk about, well, the likelihood and the chances and what you have to support your position and your choice, we don't have to go through all that work with the Deferred Sales Trust, because we know thousands of trusts, 22 or so audits or reviews, and in all of those, 0 findings and 0 changes. And the tax attorney who stands behind this, the creator of it all, he provides lifetime audit protection. So not a dime to the client to protect the deferral of these really large and otherwise taxable transactions.
Yeah, very well said. And we also have national law firms, huge groups that have done extensive due diligence for multiple years and that have approved it, used it, or on the inner circle. We have the entire list. And so, I think we covered that pretty good today. So let's transition a little bit, Jake. Any live deals, Jake, that you kind of want to talk about, like what's going on, some of the nuances, what we're looking at? Maybe we can talk about the one we're working on in Florida for the doctor who's selling the business, and kind of break that down. You want to kind of give some of the general specs of that deal, and then we can kind of dissect that for the team or for everyone who's listening.
Absolutely. We have a very talented physician who has taken medicine into further, I would call it, into the wellness area. And she's looking to expand her practice and build her business. She wants to have multiple locations in the future. And one of the ways that she's going to go about doing that is by raising capital through selling ownership in her company. So she's looking at selling, I believe, I can't remember the exact number, but we're looking around 30% of the shares in her company. Now, shares, that's an asset that has appreciated over time. So it's a highly appreciated asset. It went from almost 0. And then, of course, some of the money and everything else that she's put into the business, it's very small. And she's going to receive a windfall, Brett, of, $5-6 million, depending on the actual numbers that come out of it all. So perfect example of how somebody can use the Deferred Sales Trust so that rather than paying taxes on that money that she's going to receive and chopping it up, giving it away to the various taxing agencies, and then reinvesting in her business, the net proceeds, she's able to use the Deferred Sales Trust to reinvest the bulk majority of that into her business and help it grow. In addition, she can take some of those personally as a K1 out of the trust when the timing's right, so that she can pursue some of her personal goals, which might have happened to include, a really nice vacation home in Costa Rica and some other things like that.
Perfect, Jake. Very well said. And what's neat about it is it just mathematically makes sense, right? When you get to a certain gain and a certain millions of dollars of tax, you have the advantage to defer that tax and the ability to use that capital to reinvest into other business ventures and to diversify, to retire. As well, the way we're structuring the deal, as she earns earnouts and payouts, and as the company grows, because she's not selling the entire company, she's selling a portion of it and she's staying in on some of it. And then as those perhaps multi-millions come out, it's going to go into one trust, multiple promissory notes over a period of time. And it's kind of like, think about dollar cost averaging. It's sort of tax exit planning averaging, as she would have been receiving, different amounts, different times paying tax. She just keeps rolling it into the trust and it keeps growing. So one trust, multiple promissory notes. And she went through it in detail of, should I use the Deferred Sales Trust? Should I not? What does it look like? What's the flexibilities? And it's huge, and she loves it. She goes, this is amazing. I just can't wait to work with Jake and myself. And we're excited to serve another client there. And we have new friends, another new friend in Florida, right? Very cool. That's one of the most enjoyable parts. Is not just the execution of these trusts and helping people have some transformation in their wealth and their retirement, but also the connection. We get the chance to serve families at a high level because of the Mr. Taxman. So very good. That's kind of the live deal of the week. Now we're going to open it up for questions for everybody. Questions about that deal, questions about anything we said about the legality of the trust, question about the any deals that you have going on right now you want to break down. You can put it in the chat. You can type something. You can also unmute yourself, and we will open it up for questions, comments, and thoughts. So I'm going to give that 10 seconds. Ready? Here we go.
Oh, good morning, everybody. I have a quick question for you.
Hello, Stephanie. Welcome. Where are you calling from?
Berkeley.
Excellent. Oh, yeah. Were you at the event? I think I met you there,
was.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We had the Berkeley event. By the way, what did you think of the Berkeley event?
It was great. I mean, that's why I'm here. I'm intrigued.
Huh?
Want to learn some more.
Sure.
But quick question for you, because I can imagine you were talking about control, and especially at that level with people with that type of assets. Yes, there would be some concern with having a third party being in control. And so is that a IRS requirement, or is that something that you guys set up to just put it together, the deal together?
It's a great question. So it is an IRS requirement in the sense that in order to maintain non-constructive receipt, you need to have a third party, unrelated party to you. So think of it like a 1031 exchange, Stephanie. Have you ever done one of those?
I have not yet, no.
Okay. Well, 1031 exchange works in a very similar way in that you have a third party qualified intermediary. Yeah. That's, you don't own that company and you're not the qualified intermediary, where you give up control of the capital for a period of time, typically 180 days, right? And during that time, they're making sure that you're following the rules and following the guidelines. You know, you're identifying the properties within 45 days, and then you're closing on one of those. And then they will send the funds back to you if you did not exchange it, and you pay the tax, and they report that to the IRS. Or you actually exchange it and they report that as well. And then the IRS looks at the dates of the timing of the close and the timing of the identification and make sure you follow those rules. So think of us kind of like a 1031 exchange accommodator, except we're going to pay you the interest, right? And typically it's about 8% net of the recurring fees on your money, but you have none of the timing restrictions, right? You have none of the 45-day identification. You have none of the like-kind replacement requirements. You have no shotgun weddings. You can be completely passive. You don't have to be active anymore. You can get funds outside your taxable estate. That's why I like to say the deferred sales is like Netflix versus the blockbuster 1031 exchange. So yes, it does require a third party unrelated trustee, and that's our role. And so does that make sense on that, Stephanie, so far?
Oh, yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's also like an IRA company too. If you think about IRA companies or retirement accounts, but it's also why we use a third-party financial advisor too, like Jake Miller, because he provides that other level of, like, Jake and I are separate companies necessarily. Same thing with a tax attorney. We're all separate. It's like the three branches of the government in one sense, right?
Yeah.
We're separate because that helps to create transparency and accountability. We're not all under one, we also use separate banks, and Jake doesn't hold the funds in his personal business account. They're held at Charles Schwab, TD Ameritrade, right? So you have all, like, so Jake was saying, in order for this to go off, you'd have to have a number of people colluding, and it's just not happening. We don't do that. We're not going to throw our lives away for something like this. So we're going to serve people. So does that make sense? Cool. Very good. But we also have clients, so you can learn from that. You don't have to take our word for it. And we have the big banks and the groups. We've been vetted ourselves and do all the background checks. Yet to be sued yet. Never sued a client, and clean track record there. Nothing in the past. So yeah, absolutely. Good question, Stephanie. Any other questions, Stephanie, your thoughts on that?
Just another one. Just sometimes someone gave me some advice that if I chose like a financial planner or something like that, or someone to create a trust for me, try to pick someone that is going to be, that you can keep coming back to, and is going to be in business for a while. We know life changes and people change, their mind, or family happens and you've got to move around or whatever. So do you guys have something in place if your team changes?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Succession plan. Yeah. What happens if I get hit by the bus? It's like probably like once people kind of decide, like, okay, I want to move forward, then they go, wait, what happens if Brett gets hit by the bus? Right. And I go, well, we have a succession plan in place. There's another trustee. In fact, my brother is becoming an expert in the Deferred Sales Trust. Right now, he is part of the succession plan for that. If we're on that same bus, right, or that same plan that goes down, then there's others that can be presented with the tax attorneys that set it up. So we do have that. Same thing with Jake. Jake, what's your succession plan in case we're on that same plane and we all go down?
Yes, well, you have this really nice, pretty young lady here named Michaeline. pretty much knows better where everything is than I do, because I kind of like leave it in her hands most of the time. I'm the one that looks pretty on TV or whatever, and she's the one that does all the hard lifting and hard work. Outside of that, we have a team of probably 13 or so people that any one of them would be able to step in, pick it up. They would have access to the accounts should something happen to us, as well as, if we just want to go on like a vacation or something, they can take the phone calls too.
Good question, Stephanie.
Thank
Very
you
good.
very much. I'm glad to
Yeah.
hear that.
Absolutely. What else? Any other questions you have, Stephanie? We're here for you. Any questions you'd like to ask?
Nope, that was it for now.
Cool. And what do you focus on, Stephanie, just so we know?
Residential real estate.
How's the market there in the East Bay? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, there
Oh,
we
you
go. We have pockets that are still doing okay, and then other pockets that are just, if that house isn't perfect, it's going to sit on the market for a little bit.
Got
So
it.
yeah, it just depends on the house and the area.
Lower velocity, lower offers. And if it's not like
Definitely, yes.
the top perfect, then it's going to sit a bit.
Yep. Yep.
Very good. Who else has questions? And by the way, we haven't heard from Rebecca. Rebecca is one of our strategic alliances up in Lake Tahoe, Truckee, luxury real estate. Rebecca, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great, Brett. Really good. I actually had a conversation with a client yesterday about the Deferred Sales Trust. So, and I about 99% certain I answered her question correctly, but she was asking about inheritance. So if you inherited the money, and then obviously it's not a transaction. So in that sense, the Deferred Sales Trust doesn't work. There needed to be some planning ahead of time before the inheritance came, correct?
It all depends. So let me make sure I understand it. So is she going to be inheriting property from her parents?
Not property, cash. Money.
Cash.
Money.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, if you're already in cash, you can't sell the cash, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
No, but trying to defer probably the death tax is probably what we're talking about.
okay.
Right?
So
Yeah.
Jake, here's the mastermind here. Depending on how much cash, is there a number there? Do we kind of have a number?
Obviously it was over $1 million. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, Jake. I mean, I think if the parents are still alive, this is kind of interesting, right? Let's imagine someone had 50 million in cash, right? And they don't have any assets, right? At this point for that 50 million. And I guess you might make the argument that you would buy, let's say, a 50 million of stock, let's just say, right? And then immediately turn around and sell it for maybe 51 million. Maybe it goes up a little bit, right? But you use the trust to jump in between. What are your thoughts on that, Jake? We haven't even covered that yet. And then we get it outside the taxable estate rather than just the 50 million of stock passing.
Incredibly strategic, because most people forget about the death tax or the estate tax, which right now there are some rather lofty and high exemptions, married, filing joint upwards of 24, whatever. But Brett, what does that number come down to as soon as the tax
12.
cuts and drawbacks?
12. Yeah. 12 married, maybe 6 single, maybe even lower potentially.
When the job.
Oh, 2025, I think, right? Yeah.
Yes. At the end of 2025, start of 2026, that number goes way down. So 50 million, and if we chop that all the way down to, anything above 12, then is subject to an additional 40% tax. A lot of people are thinking of the here and the now, and that's important because this is the here and the now, they're one-time transactions. But if we can accomplish the here and the now plus the later in one fell swoop by doing the deferred sales trust in such a way that we are effectively moving these assets outside of their estate, then we've saved them twice.
Does that make sense, Rebecca, on that?
It does. And if it's a property, then they have the stepped up basis that we're talking about, similar to the family cabin.
For the capital gains tax. So they would solve that challenge, but they don't solve the estate tax. So again, let's clarify that. Let's imagine, and we were just in Lake Tahoe, Rebecca, doing deferred sales trust, man and woman on the street, and there was I think we did a $65 million listing, right? We didn't have the listing, but we're basically going and saying, hey, if you're listing with these fancy realtors, but they're not helping you defer or eliminate your estate tax or defer your capital gains tax, then you're missing out, right? So it's a little plug there. We did a whole video. By that series is going live on YouTube. You can see it. It's me, Rebecca, Brent, and Derek walking the Lake Tahoe, these fancy things, and it's kind of cool. So check that out. But the point of the whole series was, the tax flow is the biggest thing. And yes, if they do die, the capital gains tax. Siri's trying to talk to me over there. Capital gains tax gets stepped up, right? So you don't have that. The basis gets stepped up, but the estate tax is not solved for. So again, back to the Rubik's Cube. What's really their problem? Their problem is not just capital gains tax. Their problem is over here. It's a 40% death tax. It's a whole nother game. So we got to make the adjustments so we can get it looking like this, right? Is that making sense, Rebecca?
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So really define the problem, right? And make sure they understand that, because most of us have been taught stepped up basis. Oh, we're tax free. That's too vague, right? That's capital gains tax free. It's not more specific estate tax or inheritance tax or death tax, which the government has a lot of different taxes. If you haven't figured that out, they're really wanting to hammer us, and because they're spending so much money that's out of control. That's a whole other topic for another day. But you can eliminate the estate tax using the Deferred Sales Trust Plus. It's called the Deferred Sales Trust 2.0. By the way, it works for any size asset. It can be $1 billion asset. We want to be serving some billionaires. Jake and I haven't quite been able to close one with a billionaire yet, but we do hope that one day it will come when they see that we're providing something that's even higher level than CRTs or CRATs or CRUTs or, gifting or, buying a bunch of life insurance. Perhaps we'll dive into that next week for ways to be advanced tax planning for billionaires. Jake, any thoughts on that?
We keep having some of the conversations, Brett. It is a long process to get to the billionaire. A lot of times we have to talk to everybody on their team. Sometimes it's a little scattered. It'd be a lot easier if we just talk to everybody on the team at once, right? But getting into those billionaires, it's either through one of their close friends or through their current advisory board, which there was an occasion that we presented, Brett, I think 20 something people, and it was a physician group. And this was a little bit ago, but it was an entire physician group with all the shareholders of the hospital clinic combination that they had. And it gets complicated talking to so many people who have so many ideas and so many questions, and they're not all on the same page. And anyway, those are some of the difficulties, but we keep having the conversations, Brett, and eventually we're going to get there. We're going to land it.
Absolutely. I believe it. All right. Who else has questions? And Rebecca, if you have more too, you can bring them back in. Looks like we have somebody in the chat here. Maybe that's a question. I cannot wait to see the YouTube. Excellent. Thank you, Leah. And Leah, glad to have you here as well. Do you have anyone have questions, thoughts, comments?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
So this recent audit that just happened, are there any audit letters or anything like that that we can get?
Great question, Pierce. In fact, I had a deal working on this week, and in fact, been working on it for a year. Okay. And we've been through all the things, and then he's just about there, but he's like, I've got this tax attorney over here. I want him to come in. And we're like, great, bring him on in. And we said, let's set up a call. And the first thing he says is, can you send me over the documents before our call? He goes, before we set up the call, send me the documents. And we're like, right. Okay. So we reply back to him, look, with a signed NDA, right? And with, this gentleman too was hesitating to even sign the conditional engagement agreements. So, it's okay. He's really cautious, and I actually met him locally here. And he's a great guy. In fact, went to the neighboring high school. Like a lot of literally like the things that you would think would be like, oh, he actually knows my brother-in-law. They graduated in the same class. Okay. Brother-in-law. And like, there's just so many connections. You're like, oh, we got this, right? No, I mean, people are, still very, very cautious. And so he's bringing, the 12th hour, this tax attorney, and we're emailing, and we're just want to set up an introductory call. And this guy's already asking for the documents before he'll even get on a call. And we're like, well, guess what? You sign an NDA. Let's get on a call to see who you are, because we don't know who these people are. And then from that point, yes. Do the tax attorneys share documents? Yes. However, realize it's not typically what you think it is, right? A lot of people think, oh, it's going to be this big dissertation that the IRS lays out all their legal reasons on why they think that it actually works. No, it's just the opposite. In fact, they give very little typically, right? Unless it's like a private letter ruling, right? Unless it's like a court case. And Jake, maybe you can speak a little bit more on this as well. It's generally just, they kind of just go away. Like, and they say, we're going to close it out, but it's not something that's going to be like, oh, all of a sudden, here's the golden ticket, right? Got the golden ticket from the IRS. They just gave the rubber stamp. Jake, can you explain a little more on that?
Yeah, so the IRS doesn't approve anything, but what we can learn are from the court cases where somebody's actually had to make a determination on whether, hey, this is a justifiable deferral or deduction or what have you, or it's not. And then the judge, through his or her determination, kind of spells why. And that's not like a law across the board for everybody, because it was very specific to a specific client and a scenario. But you can kind of mirror or expect a precedence to be set that should be disallowed for said thing or said reason. This time, it might be disallowed for that same thing for a similar client in the future. And so we kind of learn the patterns and the trends of what is allowable and what is not. And the fortunate thing with the Deferred Sales Trust, they've never disallowed it. And they've never said, let's change it. And they've never said that there's any findings that we don't like. And so batting 1,000 right now, you really can't go wrong. Or, you know, people like Brett and I wouldn't allow you to go wrong. We wouldn't allow you to do this if this wasn't a good fit for you.
Yep. And then also too, is get the client on the call. Like whoever's asking for the documents, haven't signed the NDAs, the attorneys will send. Yeah, we have 0 findings, 0 changes, and we have had over this many audits. We just had another one last week, and they'll put all of that in writing. And this is the reality. If they weren't telling the truth, they can be disbarred, right? So they have it all there, but we're not in the business of giving away anything to anybody who could use it against us or try to use it to go around us, right? So we're very protective of the strategy for 2 reasons. 1, we don't want competition, but 2, most importantly, we don't want people to mess it up, because they take the thing and they try to do the thing, especially if they got any of our documents, right? And then they, it's like a brand new, brain surgeon trying to, I got the recipe here and I went to med school. I just got out of law school and I've done a few things and therefore I'm going to give it a shot. And then that gets audited and it's under the guise of Deferred Sales Trust. And then all of a sudden, boom, that blows up. And then guess what? All the qualified intermediaries and all the others that are skeptical and cautious, they see, it doesn't work. It got blown up. And we're like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to keep it perfect track record as much as we can with the people that we work with. And we protect it because it's so special. And so hopefully that answers your question, Pierce.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just like, I get those sometimes a lot, oh, can you send me the ruling or whatever? And so, it's interesting that the IRS is kind of just like, okay, I'm going now.
Yeah. And remember, people, even if you give them the ruling, right, you realize that people aren't going to be overcome. I mean, there's evidence there. They're going to be overcome not by just the evidence and the logic. And by the way, I've seen these things. It's like 1.5 pages, right? And it just says like, per this. And it's just like, it's pretty like just simple and plain. It's not all of a sudden, oh, I'm a believer, right? People's change their false beliefs on it's too good to be true if it's legal, not based part of it's on the evidence, but more it's on telling them a better story. And that's why I would encourage you to tell the David Young story. And you probably already are, Pierce, but as a reminder for everybody, David Young and Bill Gross and about 5 guys built a company called PIMCO from 80 billion to 1.2 trillion. They're financial advisor extraordinaires. And they manage some of the biggest wealth in the entire world. Okay. For about 20 years, they all retire, get a big payday. And then David and 4 other guys form a group called Anfield Capital, and they do a 2-year due diligence on the Deferred Sales Trust. 2 years of intense legal, financial overview, backgrounds, all of it in their team. And they came through with the conclusion that that tax attorney who's our business partner might be the smartest person we've ever met. We call him the Elon Musk of tax. He's brilliant. Number 2, we're all in, and they can support and be a part of the team with Jake and I to manage the money. And so we always say to people who are skeptical and cautious, and they should be, because there's a lot of things that do not work, right? and are not worth the trouble of you looking at it. But if it's good enough for David Young and his legal team after 2 years of due diligence, and they're a part of the inner circle, is it good enough for you, right? Is it good enough for you to get on a call for an hour? The other thing that's shocking to me sometimes, Jake, and Pierce, is that these attorneys and these people that are, just give me the documents or just give me the thing. They're not even willing to get on a call for an hour to talk with us for 30 minutes to hear us, right? It's like, so you're asking us to give you all of our stuff. And basically it's just like it's throwing out, give me everything. And maybe I'll think about, giving you guys the time of day, but we don't charge on the call. Like, it's no cost, no obligation. Jump on a call, bring up your questions. And here's what actually happens when they do that. 99% of them just join us. They go, oh my gosh, what you guys have here is actually special. It's not just Google. It's not just all of the other stuff I've heard in the past. And they join us and start sending us referrals. So the biggest thing I would say, Pierce, is try to get them to the call with us, bring them on the mastermind, have them bring up their challenges on these open forums. We are happy to do that. Jake, any other thoughts on that?
You're absolutely correct that when people actually do sit down and give us the time and the respect to try and understand what we have going on, rather than just continuing the same modus operandi that they've been doing forever, then they oftentimes, out of humility, join us. I say out of humility because it's not the math, it's not the science, it's not the tax law or any of that stuff that gets in the way. It's typically ego and personality. And I like to think that, Brett, you and I and everybody else here with the Deferred Sales Trust, that we have a pretty easygoing personality and we're willing to work with people. And in fact, we're usually pretty, how would you say, extra nice, so to speak, and trying to help people get across this hurdle so that they can get the right education, right information, so they can make a conscious, deliberate decision. It's that 1 out of 20 people who for purposes of ego, they don't want to even have a meeting unless you send everything over. Or, they just want to try to rip off the strategy and abuse it and do it their own way, which we're not very easygoing when it comes to that.
Yeah. And the other question too are you the client paying that person to come on? So, hey, I will pay you $1,000 to be on this call for an hour, or $500, whatever it's going to cost for your hour of time. Would you please come on? I think also sometimes you got to give the CPA a break, or whoever is a skeptic, is because the client may or may not say, like, I will pay you to go do this due diligence with me. Come along for the journey, be in the passenger seat with me and not in the rear view mirror. Sometimes clients are going so fast that they're like, hey, CPA, catch up. Like, I'm just going to do this thing. And they're just, and the CPA is like, well, why weren't you humble enough to bring me along in the very beginning? Right. And sometimes it's not even like a deliberate, like thoughtful thing for the person who's looking at it. They're just like, oh, you're right, I'm just moving too fast. So instead, just take the approach of, hey, I'm considering this. I would love for you to poke holes in it if there's any holes. So far, my research has not been the holes, but would you come on a call with these guys? Would you consider asking the questions that I'm not asking? And again, bring them in the passenger seat with you, pay them to do the thing, right? To actually be there and come up with the questions. That being said, anyone else have any other questions for Jake, myself, or Pierce, the Deferred Sales Trust? Welcome to unmute yourself now. Put it in the chat. We are here for you. And we have 8 minutes left before all of us have to get to something else. So where are we, people?
I would love to hear a show with just based on objections. Like if you could do a whole show based on objections, like every time somebody says that doesn't make any sense or it doesn't work, and then how you guys were able to respond to that. What would the solution? I know you guys do that every show anyways, but you always kind of based on one, but I want to hear like the real, like the constant ones that you guys get.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Not to be offensive at all, but I think we could have fun with that, Brad. Like if you give me a little bit of a comedic license for a minute, I could get somewhat dramatic and I could take on the persona of some of these people. That could be kind of fun.
Why don't we do that next week? We'll do like a role play, right? Well, Jake and I we'll be one another. I'll be the skeptical CPA, right? And then you be the person, and then you reverse order, right? And then we reverse it every other one. And how about this for everyone here? If you could be thinking about objections, right? Maybe type them in the chat, maybe email Jake or I, all of these things so we can prepare. And then let's do that, Jake. Let's just make it like a role play, right? I'm gonna be so tough. I'm gonna get my, I will put a hat on, maybe some glasses, like, so you can't see my eyes, like the poker guy, We can think through this, Jake, and be like, sitting there. How about that? Does that sound good?
Yes, that's perfect. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try to bring in like 10 people so they can watch this entertaining show of like, most of the time what takes, people think of stiff and boring and rigid. I'm going to show them, I'm going to say, look at these guys. These are really high professional. They work with, high network kind of people, and look at them having fun with this because they truly know what they're talking about, and they can even be comical about it and not just always serious. So
I think it's an amazing idea, Leah. We're gonna have fun with this because we've been, done this maybe, I don't know, 50 times now on these calls. I don't know, maybe 40, how many we've had, but I think that'll be really cool. So look for that next week. We're gonna start it. What should we call it, Leah? What do you think? The Deferred Sales Trust satire, like what would we call it? It's like Seinfeld,
Brett.
Yeah. I don't know.
Really
Why don't you call it I don't know. Like, have you ever had Bad Bakers, the donut shop?
Yeah.
There's a donut shop called Bad Bakers. Okay. There's a play on words, right? Bad Bakers, but they're amazing, amazing donuts. So I don't know. Maybe you could do something like that.
Let me think about that. Yeah. I don't know what it would be yet, but
are we going to be in Dallas?
Yeah, that was the other question I had too. I'll be in Dallas. So I want to know if commercial is going to be doing something.
Good question. I will be in Dallas. Tony Robbins, Jake Miller still on the fence. He might have something else going on. Pierce is going to be there. It's going to be incredible. DLP Capital is going to be there. So that is August 23rd. If anyone else wants to join us for the Real Estate Mastermind, it's going to be incredible. 23rd to the 25th at the Gaylord Texan in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. Incredible. Okay, that being said, I think we're running out of time here. Jake Miller, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best place for them to find you?
Absolutely. strategictaxsolutions.com, 1-800-773-1848. Either way, you can schedule a time and a place like Zoom, and we can meet up.
Amazing. Pierce York, for people who want to get in touch with you, what is the best place for them to find you?
You can find me on the podcast doing some interviews. So definitely check that out. Capital Gains Tax Solutions YouTube channel. Sporadically we go live, but also Kingdom Luxury Realty. And you can find me on Facebook or my phone number's all over the interwebs there. So
amazing. Thank you, Pierce. And for those who want to get in touch with me, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. And I want to also encourage you to check out the new book that's coming out, Building a Tax for Exit Strategy. Hey, a little secret. It's coming out soon, and we have DJ Miller in the book. We have the Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. I got a couple chapters too, and some other smart people. But it's all about building a tax for exit strategy. It's kind of the inner origin story and inner secrets of the Deferred Sales Trust. You're going to be inspired. You're going to be educated, and you're going to love it. Hopefully you will. I think you will put a lot of time and effort into it. So look for that coming out on Amazon here soon. And then invite someone who can be encouraged and can learn this. Go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com and start your Deferred Sales Trust today if you're ready to get going. And we so appreciate everyone out there in the YouTube, Facebook, wherever you might be consuming the content, iTunes land. Please rate, review, subscribe, and we'll talk to everyone again soon. Bye, everybody.